The focus, of course, is how we've made navigating in Stratum easier, in particular Stratum viewer views. Let's just get my screen activated here. Okay, so our agenda today, of course, is navigating in views. In particular, we're going to be focusing on something that we're rolling out in the 6.8 release of Stratum Viewer, and that version has gone into controlled release. I'll show you some resources at the end of this presentation where you can sign up for more information, where you can find more information than what we'll talk about today. And I did want to point out, I have muted everyone's audio, but I will open up audio in the chat at the end of my presentation in case you have some questions or comments. And of course, you can always email us after the fact if you think of something later. So the key feature we're going to be talking about today from the 6.8 release is something called the navigation panel. And that's going to be a section that appears above all the views and above what we call the view filter section. And this takes the spotlight in our latest release, and we hope that this change will make a big impact in its small amount of space. We're also going to be talking about some updates to the nearby view filter section after we talk about the navigation panel. So what are some of the benefits and features of the navigation panel? One of the things that we hope will be a great tool for all users is that it gives you an overall snapshot of the view. And I'll show you some live examples of this in a few minutes. But it gives you an overall snapshot of what you have to look at currently and what you can go to if you drill or click within the view or within the panel itself. The panel also bundles some core view exploration and editing options, which we'll look at in a minute too. And that includes a streamlined way to add dimensions or levels. You might call them levels as well. Things like your products, lot numbers, customer sold tools. We think this design will appeal to a broad variety of users, depending on if they're advanced or very new to Viewer. We think this will give them some great tools to feel comfortable editing their views and to see some obvious ways that they can edit the views without having to right-click or use View Explorer, or if they don't have access to View Explorer because of their user level, they can use the navigation panel to make some edits and customize their views. It's also, the navigation panel also increases functionality on touch devices. So if you have an iPad or Surface Pro that you're using to look at Viewer with, some of these features in the navigation panel will be extra appealing to you. Because we've got some things that will make it easier to manipulate your views and add data to your views. I'm also going to, after we look at the navigation panel, we'll talk about how to control the display of it. We'll look at something that changed, a slight change with the user options interface, and then we'll go on to the view filter section. The view filter section is always appearing above your grid, above your data in the view. And we'll talk about how it conveys more filtering details and gives you access to some editing shortcuts. So let's go into our environment for Viewer. I am going to point out a few things that are from our previous release, because some of that may be new to you as well, depending on what you're using right now. So to get to some of the views that we're looking at in the demo today, I'm going to use the favorite and recently used views window. That came out with our 6.7 release of Viewer. And that allows you to flag views that you want as your favorites, and then you can organize them as you want. We also automatically track your recently used views by this week, last week, and older. And you can run the views from here. You can open them in editing mode if you need to do that. It's a shortcut from looking up the view in the left panel. And you can add or remove views from either list from this window. Let's look at the navigation panel. Okay, I brought up a fairly simple view in terms of how much information is in the view, but we may look at some that have a little more data in them. But the general idea is that as you look at your navigation panel without having to right-click or opens a separate interface, you can see right away everything you have available to work with now and shortcuts to change what you have to work with. So we have to market visible, so that shows up on rows in this blue underlined text. And I also can go to customer sold to or product category. And anything that's available but not physically visible in the view yet will be in this black or dark gray text. So the add feature that I want to talk about before I show you how to move around in the views with this navigation panel is something that we think is really going to appeal to all levels of users, because it will hopefully be a very obvious way when they look at the view and they see the plus sign, oh, I can add something here. So it will mean that they're not going to have to go and right-click in the view, choose Edit, and they won't have to open up View Explorer. They can just click Add, and that's for either rows or columns. I'm going to add something to rows to show you something else that's new as part of the navigation panel. So what we have here is a very straightforward list of all the information that I can pick from to add to my view, and this is available from the navigation panel. I'm just going to add one for now. I'll add buyer. And wherever you add, whatever you have added will show up directly after what is currently visible in the view. So if I had drilled down to product category and added buyer, buyer would show up at the end. However, it doesn't have to stay there. You can use another tool in the navigation panel, which are the availability of drag and drop features, or just moving your information. This is one of the things that, in addition to the add and also a delete icon, the drag abilities we think will be useful, especially for folks with a touch interface, because we've kind of added some features for them to move around their data. So I will take buyer and make it the first level on rows. You can also drill up or down using the navigation panel, or still in the grid as usual, and everything will stay in sync. So I'll go on to look at Jerry Kaplane, and I'll move down to customer sold to. I'm going to add a few more pieces of information to the view, so I can talk about a couple other small things. Not small things, but simplified things that we've made available in the navigation panel. We'll add ship to, distribution center, and product type. Okay. One thing I could have done if I'd wanted customer ship to be up further in my view and not have to move it through drag and drop, I could have drilled up to where I wanted it to be first. So let's take it back out a minute. Let's say I wanted it to show after ship to market. I click on ship to market to bring my level of the view up to ship to market, and then I could do my add. So the order in which you either add or drag or drop or drill may save you a few seconds of editing time. So let's go back to ship to. So there's customer ship to, which I just added, and I wanted it to be after ship to market, so I drilled up there first and then I did the add. Again, if I had added now and I wanted it to show somewhere else, that's fine, because I can drag and drop. I can also drag and drop or move something from rows to columns. I'll drop it there to change, again, how I'm looking at data in the view. It's also very easy to get a sense of how do I remove something from my view. So we've got delete icons next to every piece of information in the navigation panel, and all you have to do is click on it. So I'm going to get rid of customer sold to, and now it's not in my drill down path or in the path of data that I have available to look at. So it's just as easy to add and delete and to move from the navigation panel. I do want to point out some helpers that we've incorporated into the panel. You've probably noticed them as I've been moving things around. These are visual cues, and we give you pop-up labels that tell you where you're going, in addition to just these very obvious symbols. If you have, I think it's in your like your mouse-enabled environments, you'll see these labels. So we have obviously the drag and drop label that tells you what you can do, if you're going to move something. We also have, let's see, another visual cue. I can see after buyer that I'm looking at JCC in particular. I can see I'm looking at all of ship to market without even looking down into the rows and columns of the view. Same for distribution center warehouse. And when I hover over one of them, it will tell me where I'm going or what I'll go back up to if I want to drill up in the view. It tells me I'm going to drill back to buyer if I click here. If you drill down in the grid, we've also enhanced the labels there as you're drilling through. So if you hover over something in the grid, it will tell you I'm going down to the product type for this particular customer ship to. Or I'm going back up to ship to market if I click on this particular member in the view. The drag and drop icon, I know I've mentioned touch devices a couple times already, but we hope the drag and drop, we might also refer to it as a gripper icon, G-R-I-P-P-E-R, gripper icon. That will be extra helpful for people with a touch interface because they can grab onto that icon and use that as their tool to move things around in the view. One final point about this navigation panel, and let me open up one other view. I'm going to choose one of my favorites. And this one has some parameters where I need to choose what I want to see in the view. This view that we're going to look at has a chart attached to it. And I just wanted to point out something that as you are moving around in your navigation panel, in your view, as well as in your chart, everything is going to be in sync in terms of telling you where you're at and what you're looking at. So if I were to drill on this particular customer sold to, the grid and the panel will update. And you can see again here, the navigation panel is telling me I'm looking at this particular customer sold to. You'll also notice there is a filter icon over next to the rows header in the navigation panel. If you see a filter icon next to rows or columns, that's your clue that there is an axis filter, a filter applied over all of either rows or columns. So an axis filter is usually an expression for filtering your entire view, or that filtering that entire axis of the view, so all of the rows. The view filter is what filters the entire view. And before I move on to talk about the view filter, let's look at something that I mentioned when we looked at our initial slides as we opened up this class, and that is how do you control the display of the navigation panel. So if I'm looking at it, I've added some things, moved some things around, and I don't need to see it anymore, I can use this navigation pin up in the view toolbar. So if you just click that, your navigation panel is hidden. Click it again to bring it back, or tap it. Another way that you can control it by default, if you don't want it to show to be displayed every time you run a view, then we can look at our user options, and every user has availability to these user options through the settings menu up in the top toolbar. And you'll notice if you've used user options in the past, it used to be a window that would replace what was physically being used in this left section or this right section of viewer. And one of the updates we've made with 6.8 is to have this be a floating window. So you can use it, apply your changes, and then go back to whatever you were using before. So that's another 6.8 update that we've made. Back to the navigation panel piece of it, we've added an option where you can deselect it or select it if you want to have the panel show up by default as the first time you run the view. If I were to deselect this and run my next view, the panel would be hidden by default, and then I just bring it back by using that little navigation pin up in the view toolbar. Something else you can do, I think before I move on to talk about view filters, in terms of the display of the navigation panel, and I'll bring up a larger view for this discussion. So you'll notice this view requires some scrolling to left or right to see some more of the details that are in the view. And you also, if you watch the navigation panel, that goes out of view when I'm scrolling around if I want to lock both these headings across the view and down the side and to lock the navigation panel, I can do that. I go into my display options, which is this little computer screen here. And if you were to choose lock rows and columns, that will lock both everything above the view, the navigation panel, the view filter section, and it will lock all these descriptive headings in the rows and the columns. So as I move up or down, left to right, everything locks in place. Now let's talk about, before I move on to the view filter again, sorry, I keep adding a few little pieces of information here. I do want to show you, it's not necessarily part of the navigation panel, but in a sense it does help you with navigating your views, because it will help you find a way to more easily communicate to people and to yourself what you're actually looking at in your views. So I think we'll go into this view here. So one of the changes in 6.8 is that we have added a way to edit or insert attribute relationships into the grid by the panel, the right-click panel, or sorry, the right-click menu. So if you wanted to add more information about product or anything that's in your view, all you have to do is do an insert, edit attribute relationships, insert or edit will bring you to the window. Normally, we had this window in previous releases. You would need to go into View Explorer to access it. So we're giving you a shortcut to get into some of the extra details that you want to add to a view. I'll just add city. So we'll double click it since I'm just adding one. And now I've added city to my customer sold to. And that was just another little piece of information I thought I'd share about the 6.8 release. So it helps people kind of figure out what are they looking at, or add more details or less details. If they don't want to look at all this information, they can take that away if they need to. While we're in this view, we can look at the view filter section. With the view filter section, we have added the same shortcuts for adding and deleting information that we've designed into the navigation panel. We have the add icon and the delete icon for every, if there were more levels in this view filter, you would see a delete icon for every single level. You'll also see more information or more immediately recognizable information. Hopefully folks will be able to key in on this information, and it'll save them some time in understanding what's being filtered in their view, or what in particular they're looking at in their view. So in this case, I'm looking at Midwest sales reps, and this is a user list. So without even having to click or hover over it, I know what rep brokers I'm looking at. I could go ahead and hover over it, and it would tell me this is a user list. If it's an expression that's being filtered, that rep broker was filtered by, I would see the term expression. I believe it would be expression that shows here. And what you can do with, as you could drag and drop up within the rows and columns, you could also move around pieces of information between those two sections with the drag and drop feature. So I'll drag that up to columns. And let's see if this will bring back data if I move that down to view filter. I'm going to open up one other view to talk about something with the view filter section. And I think that was my, try this view. I just wanted to point out too, I know I already mentioned you can add and delete. The shortcuts for filtering that you've had in the past with the view filter still apply today. So if you were to click on any part of that view filter, you would be brought into the window for editing the view filter. So what rep brokers am I looking at? Right now it's a single person. I'm going to add a few more. When it was a single person, his name appeared there. Now that I have multiple people selected for this filter, multiple will just display as your shortcut or your hint to the fact that more than one salesperson is being, their data is being displayed in the view. I'm also going to do an add here. We'll add ship to territory. to change around the view a little more. And when you add, remember, once you add a dimension or level into the view filter, you have to pick what data you want to look at, so it's an actual filter. So we'll do that. And again, I've got more than one ship to territory, so I'll see the word multiple. If it was just one ship to territory, it would just be that particular territory name that would apply or would display here. So if normally I'm not sure how many people drag and drop to rearrange what's in the view filter. More likely you'll use it to drag and drop up into rows or columns to rearrange some things in your view. But the option is there from both the view filter and the navigation panel. I think in all the examples I've been showing you, I've been dropping information onto the first position in rows and columns, and that's not the only thing you can do. You can really drag and drop anywhere within the navigation panel to change things around. I think I don't know if this is a larger view. If not, I'll add some more pieces of information. So I've been in, I think in all my examples so far, I've dragged to the first position in rows or columns. You can drop or move information anywhere you want. So let's say I want to have product category be in the second position in my view. I can do that. Drill down to it. If I want, let's add a couple more here. We'll add region and rep broker. You can move things between existing things that are visible. So I'm going to, again, drop it in between, and that will make it the next visible. Oops, let's say product brand, make that the second. Make that the next visible. So if you have several pieces of information or several levels already visible and you drag something in between those spots, that the item or the level that you drop will become visible. So region, if I dropped it here, I believe it's going to go ahead and refresh the view with region displayed. Yep, there's region. And as I drill back and forth in the grid, that detail level will update up in the navigation panel. And I don't know if I've showed you an example of dragging in between the navigation panel and the grid, but you can do that as well. You could grab something from the navigation panel and bring it down into your view. Let's say product brand, onto product, and rep broker, onto, let's do that onto product brand, home cooking. So there's a lot that you can do to manipulate what you're seeing in the view and craft exactly what you want to hone in on when you're pulling up your information. So the fact that that we've made the navigation panel and some updates to the view filter extremely streamlined, and we hope the way that we've designed it will encourage users to try their hand at editing views and reports. Maybe some folks who maybe they've shied away from doing that because they didn't have access to View Explorer, or they didn't want to go into the View Explorer. They just want to make a couple of little changes. We hope will find the navigation panel and all the features we built into it very appealing. And again, remember, this also opens up some nice features for folks who have a touchpad or a Surface or an iPad, any type of touch environment. We have the drag and drop gripper icon, and then the delete and the add icons, which anyone can spot and go ahead and use to customize their views. So the straightforward nature, making it appeal to a wide variety of users, also makes for a shorter presentation today because there's hopefully it's also self-explanatory, even though I've pointed some things out to you. But we hope that as people start to try this out, they'll see how easy it is to get you hooked on using it to customize their views. I will point out a few other things if you want to learn more about 6.8 and features I haven't covered yet. I'd like to point out a few things for you in that respect. Let's go back to my PowerPoint. And we've talked about this piece. So we have a lot of other resources available out there, both in Viewer and from our Silvon website and in other classes. I'm going to point those out to you, and then I will open up the lines for questions, either by chat or by phone. So we have some links in Viewer 6.8, which I'll go back and show you. We have a What's New in 6.8. It's a PDF, and it also includes a video, I think about a 3-minute video that covers both the navigation panel, view filter section, and some other administrator changes in 6.8. We also have a home page that's available from Viewer and a Viewer video resources page. And we also have an upcoming Insight class. If you go to or attend the February 23rd class, it will cover some more of the 6.8 features. And those are features pertaining to filtering and how we've made some of those features in filtering and in view archiving easier for both your everyday users and your administrators. Let me go back to Viewer for a moment. So in Viewer, I think I mentioned learn more links, and what are those? Those are something that's new in 6.8. And our views, if you hover over some of the major pieces in the interface, we've added some text with links to videos or help topics, which will help people understand what they can do with all the different features in Viewer. So if you will, if you take up 6.8 or you sign up to use 6.8 and you go into our controlled release, you'd be able to take advantage of these features. There is a video about the navigation panel that will review highlights that I covered today. It's a couple minutes long. And then we also have the home page. If by default you're not using this home page, I'll point out some other spots where you can find the same information that I'm going to show you. But we have a home page with the list of Stratum Insight classes, including that February 23rd class that I told you about. We also have a link to the What's New document. And in that document, you can find a link to the video of What's New. I mentioned there's some filter changes coming up. Here's a little peek at that window. We've added some tabs for controlling filters of all types in your views. And the What's New document also gives you a great summary of not only this current release, the latest release, but previous, I think we've got the previous 4 releases. So nice summary information of what has changed with links to those PDFs and videos as well. And also from the viewer interface, we have a videos link, which takes you to a page of all of our videos, not just the What's New, but other resources out there, including the navigation panel video, which I brought up a couple minutes ago. And that also has a link to the What's New video. If you're not at the 6.8 release, of course, you have other resources out there on the Silvon website to look at. So on the Silvon website, under Resource Center, you can see, let's see, you have options to look at the Stratum Viewer videos page, as well as a page of archived Insight classes and a list of upcoming Insight classes. Let's go back to the Viewer video page. So if you come out into the Silvon website, that's www.silvon.com, and go to Resource Center, Viewer videos, you will have the same access that I just showed you from within the controlled release. You can access the 6.8 PDF and the video, as well as some other recent videos that speak to 6.8 features, the navigation panel. And there's also a video out there about the favorite and recents window that I just showed at the beginning of this webinar. So that's a nice resource to have as well if you're at the 6.7 release. I believe that covers everything that I was going to touch upon today. So we mainly focused on the navigation panel. However, we also wanted to point out some things related to the view filter and inserting attribute relationships or descriptive information to your views, all of which help make navigating in your views in Stratum easier and hopefully have some time savers in that area of using Viewer. So I will go ahead and unmute the phone line here. Before I do that, I'll leave this slide up so that if you don't have questions at the moment but think of them later, go ahead and email us or call us, and we will get back to you with an answer. Let me see if I can unmute. And I'll also bring up my chat panel. Let's see. So I've got my chat panel displayed.
Unmuted.
And hopefully I have successfully unmuted everyone's line. So I'll just hold on here for a few more minutes and wait for your questions.
Hey, Karen.
Hello.
Hi, this is John Roach over at HarperCollins.
Hi, John.
How's it going?
Good, good. Thanks.
Good walkthrough. I have a couple of questions that about the panel, the new panel. You had shown the axis filter, but how would you actually go in and use the axis filter?
Let me bring that back up again.
Because and now it's the buttons, the two little buttons on the left-hand panel up above. And I know I saw that you had an access filter on one of the reports.
Yes.
But I was curious how you would access that now.
Sure. Let me bring that view up. I think that was, if I can't remember the exact view, I'll show you in a different view how to bring it up. This wasn't the exact view, but I could have clicked on, if there was a axis filter here already, I could have clicked on that filter icon. You're saying, your question is then how do I apply a new filter if there's not one there already? Yeah. So one of the easier ways, and I think this will be covered in the February 23rd class in more detail, but we have this filter icon at the top of views, which if you open that, it's kind of your master center for filtering now. So this will be new within 6.8. You can add a filter, edit a filter on your levels, your measure items, and an axis. So we don't have a filter on either one, but if I were to add something, I've brought myself into the expression window for rows or columns.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. And then the second question I had was, is there any potential future enhancement to the top panel, the navigation panel, where you're going to have right-click capabilities to open things like properties so that you can actually go in and change properties on specific dimensions or measures if you need to?
I'm glad you asked that question because I think I missed sharing that. I believe it's there now. I just didn't show that to you.
Oh, awesome.
So,
cool.
Yeah, so if I wanted to look at product and pick properties, I can do that. Now I believe this is just your mouse-enabled environments. So if I'm not sure if we have, well, I'll have to test it out. I don't have an iPad in front of me to test it out if that's the same case for iPad or touch devices, but yeah, you can click on pieces of information, and I think you can also do that for the rows header and the columns header. So I'm right-clicking on columns here, and I can bring up the properties for columns. I think I'm blocking some of that with a little panel I have up, but there you go.
Awesome. That's good.
Okay.
Cool. And I have Rosalind, who'd also like to ask something.
Hi, Karen.
Hello.
This is Rosalind. How are you?
Hi, Rosalind. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I had a question. I was wondering if you could actually pause. So when you were using the navigation pane or panel, you were, moving different things around, and each time, your mouse is spinning and spinning. Is there any way to pause that, like when you have the View Explorer window up, so that you can make multiple changes and it doesn't update until you're done?
So yeah, in View Explorer, you make, let's say, three to five changes, and then you have like an add or apply changes, an OK. Let me just do something now.
So you can't do that from the navigation panel?
The navigation panel is meant to be more like as you do it, the change happens. So we're hoping that, if you have a number of changes to make and you're comfortable with the View Explorer, you would probably still use that option. We wanted to also appeal to users who maybe just have maybe they don't have access to View Explorer, or they're not comfortable with that many, with that series of changes. They can make one on the fly or more than one on the fly, but that change applies right away when you're in the navigation panel. Any change you make,
Awesome.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Are there any other questions from anyone else on the line? I do want to add something. In the previous class I taught, someone was asking me a question and I couldn't hear it, and they also chatted me a question and I didn't see it come through on chat. So if someone is having that difficulty now, please do use that email, or there's a feedback mechanism, I think, after most of our classes where you can take a survey about the class. Please do email us at info@silvon.com, or if that survey comes up, use that survey comment section if for some reason I'm not hearing your questions or seeing them in my chat interface.
It's not insurance sales. American Family, yeah, that's insurance.
So it sounds like